Welcome back once more to Inside Politics here on KTN News. Chief Justice Emeritus David Maraga officially handed over the instrumental power to his deputy, now acting CJ Philomena Mwilu. Maraga said quite a few things in his exit interview. Just to quickly go through some of these hard-hitting parting shots, including hitting out at the president for disregarding court orders. He spoke to my colleague, Sophia Wanuna. Listen.
3 decisions directing the president to appoint.
All disregarded.
All disregarded. And remember, the president derives his power from the Constitution. This is a constitutional obligation. I have heard even some people argue that the president is above the law. The president is not above the law. The president is only above the law to the extent that you can't take him to court when he is still serving.
Yeah.
You've got to wait until he has left office, then you take him to court. But the president is supposed to be in the forefront in obeying the Constitution. He must lead by example. When he refuses like that,
yes.
I mean...
What's the recourse?
The recourse is, orders have been given. If it was in other jurisdictions, he would be impeached.
Because isn't that the reason why he's not doing anything?
Yeah, because he knows nothing will happen.
Exactly.
Retired Chief Justice David Maraga, there speaking to Sophia Wanuna last week, said a number of things, including, I wanted to hear that, saying that if it were in other jurisdictions, the president would have been impeached for disobeying those numerous court orders that we have reported on quite expeditiously here. Let me begin with you, Kipchumba Karori. I want us to talk about the legacy of the retired CJ, but we saw him at loggerheads with President Uhuru Kenyatta from the start to finish, since, especially ever since the 2017 election. What are your thoughts on his latest or last remarks over his relationship with the head of state?
Thank you, Ben Kitili. I must join all Kenyans of goodwill in wishing the retired Chief Justice a good life after retirement and hoping that his legacy of being steadfast and defending the rule of law will supersede him. But when it comes to his statement of whether Uhuru Kenyatta will have been impeached, that is a statement that he himself qualified it because the grounds that the impeachment ought to have happened. I might have different opinion on what he thought about it, but I am limited in terms of the scope and how he looked at it, because having been a CJ, he must have looked at things from a different bird's view, because I'm looking at it from a law looking up, but for him, he had a view that he looked at it from a national point of view. But I am really restrained from agreeing with him. I am constrained, rather, with agreeing with the Chief Justice because in terms of appointing the 40 judges now, we lost one of them. In terms of appointing the 40 judges, Uhuru Kenyatta as the president really has no reason whatsoever and why he should not appoint those. And secondly, there is something he said, what about obeying court orders? There is no reason a government cannot obey court orders, and that government is also founded on rule of law. To that extent, I agree with him that yes, the Uhuru Kenyatta administration ought to have been impeached a long time ago, because there are things that we must do. We don't do them for Uhuru Kenyatta and his administration, but we do them for the posterity of this nation. That's why when you read our preamble, we gave ourselves this constitution and our posterity, obeying court orders, following the due process of law. We don't do it because we do it for certain individuals. We do it because we do it for our children, for this nation today, tomorrow, and its future. Then coming back to the legacy of Maraga, I choose to look at his legacy on a three-pronged. One, the CJ as the head of the Supreme Court and as the head of, I look at it from the jurisprudential point of view. In that view, I am very afraid to say that he did not do much in terms of growing jurisprudence, because apart from annulling the 2017 election petition and the few things he did, we did not see him well at the center of the growth of jurisprudence. The other part which also I look at him, secondly, I look at him as the chairman of the Judicial Service Commission, as the administrator and the administrative head of judiciary. To this end, there are things that he did that we can say helped judiciary to survive during the COVID times. They were unprecedented times, but that online kind of thing really sorted out us, and the expansion of the court infrastructure came in handy. Those are some of the things that were, to him as the head of the Supreme Court, as the head of the chairman of the JSC, he did quite well. And the third limb will be, we look at the Chief Justice as the politician, as the person connecting the one arm of government with the other. Here he became too, I will say, he tried to reestablish the place of judiciary. He scored highly as a politician within and the head of that part of as the head of the judiciary, as a third arm of government. He tried to assert the place of judiciary, although he really had run-ins with government, and I am hoping that the next Chief Justice can be able to mold the three roles into one and be able to assert the place of judiciary, as well as being able to have a discussion with the executive, because the budget cuts, and even now we need to operationalize the judicial fund to enable judiciary be independent, because we cannot say the judiciary is independent when the funds are being controlled from elsewhere there.
All right. Ishmael Neribo, let me bring you into this. You're a lawyer. I want your view on this. Especially the last 4 years of his tenure as CJ were characterized by the judiciary being handicapped. Thanks to those altercations between the judiciary and the executive, the wars between himself and the President Uhuru Kenyatta, where do those leave the judiciary?
Yes, thank you, Ben. I think that the one Chief Justice we've had in this country who did not seek to control the judges and impose his views or opinion on judges, it is Justice Maraga, a retired CJ. If you talk about, like, my brother Karoli is actually trying to, zone his comments, what he's trying to say, I can just put it in another light on my own. The issue of Maraga being a stickler to law and loved by everybody who thinks that he was a fair judge, 100%, that he is cause entirely. But when you talk about political understanding and machinations, I think he gets less than 10%. He did not, you see, this is a CJ who has direct link to State House or to the executive, but he did not want to use that approach at all. You know, he needed to have the judiciary paid well, treated fairly, and he thought that by being a stickler to law and citing provisions of the law, then he would be respected on that account, and probably the executive and State House machineries would recognize that and probably help the judiciary. But far from it, they had told him, we will revisit. And they had actually totally bottlenecked the operations at the judiciary by not giving funds. So what would you do? As a political president of the Supreme Court, you must put down the gown and now seek to negotiate for your share, for your fair portion of the money in the judiciary by trying all means, which Karoli is calling political means, to ensure that you convince both State House and the executive so that they can release the money. So the next Chief Justice must be so good at that. By the way, if we had a Chief Justice like Maraga, who then could wear a political hat, what I mean is he should understand how those cartels work. I mean, they don't give a damn about the sanctity of the judiciary. They will not respect the court orders. So what will such a person do? He must be, you see, Chief Justice had a younger brother of his who is actually sitting with the President Uhuru Kenyatta every single day. They have a special chemistry. They talk well. They are friends. And you still can see that he cannot rise up above the technical understanding of what the law requires so that he can get out of the fence and say, hey, brother, I want this to be done for my department, for my judiciary, and I want to leave the judiciary, you know, having accomplished this and that. And what I need you to do with the head of state is to do 1, 2, 3 things. What is so difficult with that? That's why, Ben, I mentioned earlier that yes, as advocates and lawyers, we must be good at understanding the law. But beyond that, you must understand the temperature in the other room, where people do not care about what you know or what you will do. Therefore, on that front, I feel that he did not score well as a political maneuver, or who can be able to bring the judiciary with parliament and the executive. That bit he failed. But in terms of his honesty, his fight on corruption, though he did not successfully, remove corruption completely, he cannot. In terms of his integrity, I think we cannot question it. But the Chief Justice must be somebody who, beyond the courts, who is able to liaise with the other arms of government so that the judiciary is no longer and not mistreated at all. Yes.
All right. Javas, do you agree? And as you tell us that, what do you think is the legacy of Chief Justice David Maraga?
Well, Ben, the memory of that man who's now retired will linger for long, and strongly so, like the effect of a high tide. What he did, his actions, will remain etched on the minds of men and women in this country. As a matter of fact, we know and is remembered, and of course it's now recorded. The things that he did that remain phenomenal and were astounding was, for example, the issue to do with the reversal of the elections outcome in 2017, and also the historical advisory to the president on matters dissolution of parliament with respect to failure to have parliament enact the 2/3 gender bill. And the man has done his bit, and I think the devil deserves his due, and that due must be given to him. With regard to matters, development of the institution of the judiciary, the courts, well, we have seen that as a conveyor belt framework, he carried on where former Justice, or retired Chief Justice Emeritus William Mutunga, left with matters of financing the construction of the courthouses or courtrooms. And we have seen the tremendous effort to see the extent that if we have such kind of infrastructure development, then such spaces also enhance access to justice mechanism from a different angle. Of course, agreeing with my learned senior Nyaribo that when it comes to matters balancing power and politics, there was a bit of limitation with regard to the person of Justice Maraga. Politics in itself and its nature is like fire. It cooks the food for consumption of human beings. It warms the bodies of men and women at a fair distance, but also burns when misused. We know very well that judicial authority is derived from the people, as it's provided for in the Constitution of Kenya 2010. And so it is with the executive authority, derived from the people, as it is with a legislative authority. It required an act of balance and playing progressive politics, beneficial politics, as the head of the judiciary, to have Justice Maraga see how to create that equilibrium emotively, intellectually, and politically between himself and as the head of the judiciary, then the head of executive, especially in this case, because it does not harm, right now as we look at things, Justice Maraga, having been at odds with President Kenyatta as the head of the executive, it will not harm President Kenyatta to continue even failing to appoint the 40 judges that are supposed to be appointed on the recommendation of the Judicial Service Commission. Justice Maraga is now home on retirement. Who is suffering? It's the people who cannot access justice. When President Uhuru will be at the end or finish his term, his second term in office, he will go into retirement as it is with former President Kibaki right now. It is ordinary Kenyans who will continue suffering if at all they do not demand the best of those who hold office in trust on their behalf. And so, with regard to the legacy of that good old man, we can say that he did his best, the best way he knew, and we must appreciate it that way. He had his own limitations. For instance, it would have been better in terms of trying to reduce matters, backlog of cases, to see how it can be enhanced that, as it's provided for in Article 159, alternative dispute resolution mechanisms being enhanced. Today, ordinary citizens in Kenya do not appreciate the value and the place of alternative dispute resolution in matters handling matters of justice and resolution of disputes. So it is anticipated that, and I hope so, that the next Chief Justice will be a man who will see how to lift up some of the weaknesses that have been self-evident in the manner in which Justice Maraga has led the judiciary. It will be remembered of that man too, that, thanks to coronavirus, he also made a good effort, in good measure, to see how ICT can be part and parcel of the execution of the justice or the justice system and mechanism in Kenya. It must not end there. Of course, the e-filing system right now has got its own challenges. It is a millstone around the neck. But it's important that we now see how to invest in technology and see how also that can help in terms of advancing the judicial development and mechanisms in Kenya.
Cherotich, was David Maraga too much of a gentleman to be too effectively head the Kenyan judiciary not against, but alongside two other arms of government which are not headed, according to some quarters, by very gentlemanly fellows, politicians of this country?
Thanks, Ben. By gentleman, if you mean, was retired Chief Justice hoodlum, a thug and a crook? No, he wasn't. And for that, I take my hat off to him. I wish him a very peaceful retirement against a backdrop of a very, very tumultuous time when he was the Chief Justice. You know, I want to say that of all the senior officials in the three arms of government, Chief Justice retired Maraga seems to be the only one who knew who actually employed him. And so no matter, and I do agree, I'm not from the halls of jurisprudence like my brothers here, but from the perspective of Wanjiko, seated here, I want to say that I felt that Chief Justice retired Maraga did his best to serve us as Wananchi. Like him or hate him, he lifted the veil on the dirty machinations within the halls of government, be it in the judiciary, the executive, or the legislature. He is the one who gave the advisory to the president for the dissolution of parliament, for its disobedience or its failure to enact legislation around the two-thirds gender rule. You know, this is a Chief Justice who, and I remember the president in 2017 throwing tantrums and talking about Wakora network, and we shall revisit. This is a Chief Justice who, against the backdrop of horrific hostility, managed to forge forward, perhaps plodding steadily, perhaps not as dramatically. You know, I like that he didn't spend his time roaming in and out of State House. I like the fact that he did his work. Yes, I understand there's realpolitik, there's statecraft, and he needed perhaps to be a bit more savvy, but he understood who employed him. And he wasn't going to go down the slippery slope of trying to kiss so-and-so's behind and to make sure that so-and-so likes him and be caught up in a web of deceit and mess where ultimately he would not be able to sleep well at night. You know, when he made his remarks about the president needing to be impeached, I think I completely agree with him. And you know why? Because, Ben, the fish rots from the head. If we're going to talk about disobedience of court orders, we're going to talk about impunity, the highest order, it starts at State House, with the head of state, with the president of the republic of this country. And for him to go for the jugular like that is commendable. And you know, with that, with the disobedience of court orders by State House, by the executive, more broadly speaking, you have paved the way for the continuous disobedience of court orders. Let me give you an example. Do you know, Ben, that in 2020, the diaspora sent 337 billion shillings to Kenya? That's about the budget of all the 47 counties in Kenya. We're talking about a diaspora where by 2014, 2015, the Supreme Court had already ruled that they should be allowed to vote. There has been continuous disobedience of that ever since. The disenfranchisement of the diaspora is unconscionable. The expulsion of Miguna Miguna is unconscionable. And so if we're going to tackle some of these disobediences of court orders, it is only fair that Maraga goes to the very top and says, look, monkey see, monkey do. If we see the president disobeying court orders, why won't anybody else disobey court orders? And there's some very major, serious issues that are sitting, hanging in the balance, waiting finally to have a government that has complete fidelity to the rule of law and respect for the Constitution of Kenya. And if we begin to see that, then we will see a change. And I'm not saying that the judiciary is exempt. And, you know, we appreciate having independent-minded members of the judiciary. But by and large, when I sit back, when I think about what Chief Justice Maraga was able to accomplish, I can only say much respect and Godspeed to him in his next journey.
Thank you, Javas. Very quickly, given the backdrop that we have over the retired Chief Justice and the relationship and the environment that is set with the executive specifically, what kind of Chief Justice do Kenyans need next?
I think that looking at the Constitution of Kenya 2010 and with the two Chief Justices that we've now had since the promulgation of this constitution, I think Kenyans, where they are right now, and Kenya as a nation, is in need of a man or woman who is very progressive and who moves swiftly and who does not owe his ascension to that office to political mandarins. I fear so much that various political power barons may want to influence the kind of individual that will ascend to that office, so that he may not be as standalone, as critical as Maraga was, for example, and here specifically with respect to the manner in which he has been widely condemned by others, especially the political powers, the reversal of the election decision of 2017 presidential election. Kenyans, I think, need a man who, as Jerotich says, will stand firmly in defense of the Constitution, a man or woman who will be there for the people, who will advance the cause of justice. And here, when I'm talking about the advancement of the cause of justice, is that justice here, as it shall be beneficial to everybody, not varying to impress the political class. Justice here being conducted or executed in such a manner as the ordinary citizens are enjoying the manner in which the judicial system works. You see, God loves common people, and that's why he created too many of us. And it is the justice system that should serve the interests of especially the common people. Today, when it comes to direct foreign investment, foreigners will fear, will develop cold feet, putting their money in this economy if they know very well that the justice system does not work squarely, properly, and effectively. That justice serves only the interests, especially of the rich. It must not vary as the chancellor's foot. And so I think our prayers to the high heavens are that a man or woman shall arise who will understand his or her duties, who will understand the place of the Constitution in that leadership position, and who will know that when you sit on such kind of high office and high seat, the eyes of a nation and the eyes of the world are on you. And whatever you do is not just a question of matters legacy, but it changes the course of a nation for the better or otherwise.
All right. Thank you for staying with us here on Inside Politics. We'll take a short break, but before we do that, let me just go through some of your views in our online conversation on what we're talking about here on the broadcast today. At Proud Kenyan on Twitter says, the Swiss rotational presidency is done among the 4 cantons, only which are historically mandated. The Nigerians are between the north and the south. If we want a rotational presidency, we should use the former regional provinces. Majimboism, not tribal. Innocent Kifi says ethnicity is so deep-rooted in Kenya and is fueled by politicians. They hunt votes and even form coalitions on tribal lines. Look at even how Uhuru structured their cabinet in 2013. Purely tribal, to be honest. Tribal is us and we are tribal, says Innocent Kifi. Laro Chris says on Twitter, your analysts sound like they are new in Kenya. Tribalism must be addressed head-on and not by meandering. Can they highlight for us on the governance structure for the last 20 years or so years and why it has been so? Thank you for your tweets. DJ Man says the rotational leadership, as much as I don't support, but this is the reason behind marginalization in this country that must be sorted out. Truth Masters, rather says Kenya is a tribal council of over 40 smaller units. Those pretending to be against tribalism are just living in denial. Let the presidency be rotational. There are those of you who are supporting the rotational presidency. John Mutiso finally says, in a political contest, you cannot talk of unity or community choice. It's about who is the best in packaging of the political message. That's why the wheelbarrow and hustlers narrative took the political masquerades by surprise. Thank you for your tweets. Keep the conversation going on Twitter. The hashtag is Inside Politics. When we come back, we shall be expecting to hear from you. Our studio lines will be scrolling at the bottom end of your screen. Feel free to call us with your views, comments, and questions. Have the final say on our discussions today. Stay with us.